you ever felt pressure to tip when you really didn't want to? Maybe it was at a drive-thru, coffee shop, or even when just grabbing a quick snack. With tips screens popping up everywhere, it feels like no matter where we go, we are constantly being asked for more. But here's the thing, this tipping trend creates two extremes. Some of us are tipping less out of frustration, while others are tipping more out of guilt. But who really loses in all of this? Spoiler alert, it's often the workers who rely on these tips just to make ends meet. Today, we're diving into the tipping culture creep and how it's changing our behavior, hurting workers, and why you might even be asked to tip at a drive-thru next time you go. Let's get to it.
Welcome to the Financial Mirror. Where future success is reflected in our knowledge of fixing the one thing we can control, ourselves.
Welcome to the Financial Mirror, and thanks for joining me today as we continue to work to improve the one thing that we can control, ourselves. Here at the Financial Mirror, it is not about the numbers and spreadsheets alone, but about transforming and educating you on money so that you can make smarter financial decisions. If this is the first time you are joining in, don't forget to hit subscribe on YouTube to be notified of all the new episodes as they release. If you are listening to this on Rumble, don't forget to like and share the video. And if you're on a podcast platform of your choice, go ahead and support the podcast by leaving a 5-star review and a written comment, as both go a long way in getting this information out to more listeners. So today's episode's not going to be super long, drawn out. You can tell by the title that this is all about this whole tipping culture creep, this tipping fatigue, this whatever you want to call it, that we are currently experiencing. So this is all off the basis of a article that I found, and I thought I would share it with everyone, but mostly what it's talking about is consumers are saying that they are pulling back on tipping servers, drivers, and hairstylists. And when I saw that, I was like, this is interesting. Why, of all people that I would, when I think tipping, one of the first places I go is to a server, right? Like that is like, that a server will make or break a whole restaurant. Like they have more skin in the game of people to come back to the restaurant than the owner themselves. More than the food, more than anything else is how well was the service that your server provided. And that's what drew me to this. If I'm totally honest, I saw this article and I was like, oh my goodness, consumers say they're pulling back on tipping servers. And then you keep going down the list and you're like drivers and hairstylists, like all three of those are very traditional. Like they provide a service. And when you are treated well, whenever people go above and beyond expectations, like there's this deal that you would leave this person a tip. Right. So before we get to the article, like this is a product of what we've seen, right? Like I said, I've called it the tipping culture. I've talked about overcoming the tipping culture in a previous episode that got a little bit of controversy around it, just because of the fact that there are people in service industries, right? Like servers that are being impacted. And so when I talk about, overcoming tipping culture or getting past tipping fatigue or talking about this like tipping culture creep and all these different little buzz terms, all I'm really talking about is the fear of what this article kind of walks through. And it's interesting because, you think about it, and now we're seeing tipping screens everywhere. You can go to a coffee shop and there's a tipping screen. You can go to a drive-thru, and literally, I've been to a drive-thru. I'm not going to call anyone out, but I've been to a drive-thru, given them my card, and then them say, do you want to leave a tip on the card? And then I have to tell them verbally, no, I don't want a tip, or tell them verbally, yes, add a blank tip. Regardless, it's very interesting. We'll just say that. Very interesting. Maybe even at a retail store, you may see like tipping type things. Not sure where all it's at. It's grown everywhere with the onset of all these various companies, with these digital machines. It has made this increasingly popular, and it's becoming more likely than not that you're going to be presented with tip options at places that before you never even thought to leave a tip. And I think that's kind of the interesting part. Before we get to the article, I think that's the interesting part, is that you're being asked to tip at places you did not traditionally tip. And I think that's interesting because when we think of tipping, it's a very like Western American culture type of thing, right? Like you think about other places in the world, tipping is not as predominant. But what I can tell you is that people are kind of waking up to this little change, because if you're presented if you go somewhere like a drive-thru, like that, it just really stood out to me when it happened. But when you go somewhere like that and they're like, "Hey, do you want to leave a tip?" I'm like, "What? Leave a tip? Leave a tip at a drive-thru? That's kind of absurd." Like I went to a drive-thru and what am I tipping for? Like, what service did you provide? Like you took my order over the microphone, which you're paid hourly to do. I drove my car up. You rushed me because that's what you're supposed to do. You should be rushing me. Like there's other people in line. Like I came to the drive-thru because I didn't want to have to sit and wait for my food and all that. Like I was meant to be in a hurry. Am I tipping you because you're doing the job that you paid hourly to do? And that's not to say, and that's the thing is, and that's not to say that it's not right. It's not to say that you can't. I'm just saying it's not normal. Like that's not where we've always been, is that you tip someone at the drive-thru. Like that's just an interesting, like I said, it may be an extreme example, but it's one that really just was like an aha moment for me. So in this article, it talks about, when we look at it, it talks about how people are changing the way they view tipping, right? Starting with that first sentence, people are a little bit stingier in barber chairs and Ubers than they were just a few years ago, right? And obviously this took time. Like initially, these machines, these digital machines started coming out, and we started to see people, these popping up, and you back in the day, you may see, like, I think the options back, a few years ago was like 15%, 18%, and like 20% or something. And now, like some places, like 22% is like the starting point. It's like 22, 24, and 30, or 22, 24, and 26, or something like that. And so it's kind of getting slightly obnoxious, for lack of a better term. But like I said, it's not the people that are, historically tipped employees that are really the ones that are using as many of these machines. I'm sure some organizations are now like coming to your table with a little like machine, like a little electronic machine, like, hey, like tap your card here and then answer these prompts or whatever. But more and more and more, it's the I walk up to the counter and I flip the screen over type of thing, where this is really like affecting those traditionally tipped employees, like servers, like hairstylists, like Uber drivers, that type of thing. And you can see, people are less likely to do that, to tip those specific jobs. So these are kind of some of the statistics here. So the share of adults who say they always tip for common services has fallen since 2021. So you can see this for restaurant servers, up right under 80%, now sitting down around 70%. Looks like hairstylists kind of went up a little bit from 60 to about 70, and now it's sitting down under 60%. Man, this one has always been low. What is this? Coffee shops and baristas just was hovering right around probably 22%, now sitting about 20%. Taxi drivers and probably Uber drivers was sitting up around 50 and now sitting down about 40. Food delivery, just from 60 to 50%. Like, man, and this is over roughly, 3 years, from 21 to 22, 22 to 23, and 23 to 24. It's kind of where that's been reflected. So you can see that this is really a big deal. And I'll share this article in the show notes. I'll share that article about tipping, and you can take a view for it for yourself. But the biggest takeaway, and like I said, I'm not going to drag this episode out, but the biggest takeaway is who really suffers, right? So these little machines, these little flip arounds, these little gadgets that give you, ask for a 24% tip. Who really suffers? Who suffers? Because someone does. Someone does suffer, and who this is affecting most are those organizations that have employees that provide services in those arenas. The hairstylists, the servers, man, 80% down to 70% for a server. That directly is almost as service driven as anything else, right? Like, you could say, and I'm not saying this by any means, but you could say that a hairstylist is paid for their service through the cost of the service, and a tip's not needed. You could say that. But if your hairstylist kind of gets you a little nick or something and messes a little something up, and they're able to fix it or correct it, like, that's above and beyond. They could have left you with a nick and you could have been walking around for a little bit, right? You could have suffered. Instead, this culture change of tipping, they're the ones suffering. When you think about servers, when you think about how servers are normally, in some states are tipped, they're tipped wage employees, right? So some states have a tip wage, and some states don't have a tip wage, but other states like California, they mandate full minimum wage even for tipped workers. But all in all, states like Texas and Georgia use like lower wage models. All of that's to say that when you're in those areas, when you are receiving a tipped wage, or you're receiving a slightly lower minimum wage, or whatever the case is, those tips are what makes the difference. Those tips are what makes the difference, and those are the people that are suffering. And I think I told this story on my previous episode, but I had a friend of mine that owned a restaurant, and he talked about how in his state they were shifting away from tips, and they were going to start paying them minimum wage. So they were going to up the minimum wage, and people were in uproar about that, right? Because when they were making tips, when they were able to take in those tips, they were making more money than if they reduce when people start reducing tips in those states, and are not getting as much tips, they actually lose money per hour. So I think I probably didn't explain that very well, but in states where tips are not, when you're not a tip wage state, people do tend to not tip as much, right? Because they know you make $15 an hour doing what you do. When you're making like $2.13 an hour, like, is out there in some places, you expect tips. Like, you expect people to tip you, because think about it from a restaurant perspective. If I have to pay my employees $15 an hour to do a job, who suffers there? Well, it's who eats at my restaurant, right? Because I have got to pay my employees $15 an hour, and in order for me to do that, I don't get tips. So in order for me to do that, what do I have to do? I have to up the cost of my food. Now, what does that do? Well, that potentially could decrease the amount of business that I get, which does what? Allows me to decrease the amount of servers I have. Now what? Now I've took people out of their job. You see how this whole thing works? It's so ironic that these little like tweaks and how laws work and how people do things change so much about a business, so much about a person. Who suffers are the people that are naturally tipped. So if you're running a business, and I know you're doing what's best for your employees, right? you got the little prompts that say, give us a tip. Good for you. Like I said, good for you. But what the stance that I'm taking here is that who really suffers are those people that are highly reliant on tips to make ends meet, right? That are not working a job that is not traditionally tipped. So anyways, hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully this is not me just tooting my or beating my drum from a high place and talking through this. But I just, when I saw that article and I saw the headlines and I thought about my time at this drive-thru that I will not mention who they are, I was just like, what service just was provided that justifies a tip here? And I really tried. So please, if I'm missing something, please leave it in the comment section. Don't blast me. Don't just demolish everything I'm saying. Just put it in the comment section. What am I missing? I'm missing something, because these tips things are everywhere. Obviously there's other people that think like me, because they're decreasing the amount of tips they're, how many times they're tipping, because that chart showed how often someone used to tip versus now. Right. So, put it in the comment section. If that's something that I'm missing, please let me know. It was kind of absurd to think through that there's this shifting responsibility from the people that are traditionally service-driven jobs to other jobs that are I'm not saying they're not service-driven, but let me give you an example, and I'm going to keep using my drive-thru example. But if I went to a drive-thru and someone took my order and someone gave me my food, and both times at the order and the food and the payment, they were all like over the place, like it was a bad experience. If it was convenient for me to get food at that place again, that experience would not affect me wanting to go there. Now, if there was that and something else where the service was okay, sure, I would probably go there. But if I like the food at this place, even though the experience was bad, and it's quick, it's convenient, it's whatever at a drive-thru, I'm still going to go to that drive-thru. Now, on the flip side, if I go to a restaurant and the service is horrible, I will never go back to that restaurant. Service is horrible. Let me not say never. I normally give places 2 shots, and if 2 times you can't convince me, you've set the standard. Like, that is your standard, and we're not going back. But that's what that's my stance there. But please tell me if I'm missing something. I saw that, thought back to my previous episode. I thought about it, and I was like, man, this has to change. This has to change. Like, it's okay. You shouldn't feel bad for not tipping. You shouldn't feel guilty for not tipping. But if you don't feel like a service was provided, it's okay to say, no tip, right? That's okay. Ironic that the food delivery is so far down. Like, that's one, like Uber driving, like, you didn't have to get in your car. You didn't have to go do something. That's a service. You didn't have to get in your car to go pick up food. Somebody brought it to your front door. That's a service. Somebody went and picked your groceries up for you. That's a service, right? Like, those people are providing you a service. And if they do a great job, they deserve to be compensated for that. If they go above and beyond. If you go somewhere else and you're like, start asking that question. What service was just provided that justifies a tip here? And if you can't land on anything, don't feel guilty when you click no tip. Don't feel judged because you click no tip. Okay. We've got to kind of take on this broader, like, cultural shift. We've got to start taking care of the people that are service driven and not get into this habit of creating this dilemma where people are fatigued at tipping. We don't need people to be fatigued at tipping. We need people to give credit where credit's due for people that are providing those services. So take a look at the article. It's a great little just reminder that this is something that is currently it's not going away. Not saying that this video is going to change anything. I hope it does. I hope this video just, if anything, if this went viral for me being, picking a side for this, cool. If it can bring some change around people just asking for tips just because they are wanting more money, but they're not really doing anything additional for that to justify that tip, then I'm happy to be the pawn here. So totally cool with it. So where do we go from here? What I would say is that the current tipping culture is not sustainable. It's not going to sustain itself. Either consumers are going to push back, or businesses are going to have to reconsider how they compensate workers. But either way, if consumers push back on the tips, there will be, eventually some change will have to happen where we can start to see differences around who's asking for tips, right? Like, sure, because if you're right now asking for tips and you're not in one of those justified places, whatever that means to you, what it means to me is that you provided a service. Like, if you provide a service that you can influence, it's good or bad, and it's directly towards me, like, I would feel inclined to provide a great tip. Like, I have, I am a person that will tip. Like, I tip people when they provide a service. But it's all about that component. So, if consumers push back, sure, there will hopefully eventually be some change around that. But I encourage you, in the comment section, do you feel pressured to tip in places where maybe it feels unwarranted? Does that like pressure you when they flip that little screen around? Leave that in the comment section. What changes do you want to kind of see in this whole tipping culture mindset? And if you haven't seen my other episode, go take a peek at it. Let me know what you think there. But ultimately, this is just something that was weighing down on me. When I saw that article, I was like, this is it. This is what I want to talk about this week. So hopefully you got something out of it. But if you did, just go ahead and like the video, share the video, continue to help grow the channel. I appreciate everyone that continues to come back every single week to hear a new episode about personal finance, financial news, financial culture, and how to help you reach your financial goals. So hopefully you got something out of this episode. Hopefully it wasn't just me ranting. I'm sure there's people out there that don't agree with me, and that's fine. Throw it in the comment section. Tell me what you don't agree with. Love to kind of hear other people's opinions, other people's experiences, and maybe from people that are in these industries, these varying industries that, if you've worked there in those industries for, more than 5 years, have you seen a change in tipping, right? I would just love the comment section to get filled with these type of stories, these type of encounters. So if I'm wrong, happy to hear some other stances, but if you have any comments, if you had any stories, just go ahead and throw those in the comment section. But like I said, hope you got some out of this episode. One thing that I think we all are trying to accomplish through all of this, and it led to probably the tipping culture from the get-go, is people want to achieve their financial goals. People want to achieve their financial goals. So if they're not making enough, then obviously tips help. Tips help their employees if you're a business owner. But ultimately, that's what we all want. So if you need some help reaching your financial goals, just head over to thefinancialmirror.org. On the homepage there, hit book now, schedule a free consultation. We'll get started and we'll help you get on a path to reach your financial goals. Like I said, I hope you got something out of this episode. Hopefully it's not a rant. It may be a rant. I don't know. It feels like a rant at times throughout it. But anyways, hopefully you got something out of this episode. And until next week, continue improving the one thing you can control, yourself. Peace.
Well, that wraps up today's Financial Mirror. Join us next week as we continue to work on ourselves, change our mentality, and to commit to achieving the success we always envisioned. Regardless of your platform, Help us grow as a community. Please like, subscribe, and share with the people in your lives.